You did not fail at manifestation. You succeeded at manifesting exactly what you assumed to be true. That is the first thing to understand, and it changes everything. When you say you have tried and failed, what you're really saying is that you tried techniques while assuming they would not work, or that you are someone to whom these things do not happen, or that life is fundamentally difficult and withholding, and life, being a mirror, showed you precisely that assumption. It gave you what you truly believed, not what you wished for or hoped for or said out loud. The failure was not in your effort, it was in your agreement with the idea of yourself as someone who fails. This is not about blame, it is about understanding how the mechanism works. Life does not respond to your words. It does not count your affirmations or measure your visualization minutes or reward you for trying hard. Life responds to the silent assumption you hold about yourself and your reality. It reflects back the inner conviction you carry, whether you are aware of it or not. If you assume that good things require struggle, you will struggle. If you assume you are unlucky, the world will arrange itself to prove you right. If you assume nothing works for you, that too becomes your lived experience, not because the universe is punishing you, but because you are generating your reality from that inner state. Most people approach manifestation as if they are trying to change something outside of themselves. They want the job, the money, the relationship, the health, and they apply techniques as if those techniques are tools to manipulate a separate external world. They visualize and affirm and script and wait, all while feeling the absence of what they desire. They perform these actions from the state of wanting, of lacking, of being the person who does not yet have, and then they are confused when nothing shifts. They believe they have done everything right. They followed the steps, but the steps were never the point. The point is the state from which you live. Assumption is not something you do, it is something you are. It is the ground you stand on, the lens through which you see, the unspoken agreement you have made with reality. When you assume something, you take it for granted. You do not question it. You do not fight it or hope for it or try to make it true. You simply live as though it is true, because to you, it is. This is why assumption creates reality, not because of magic or mysticism, but because you cannot experience anything that contradicts what you deeply assume to be so. Your assumption determines what you perceive, how you interpret, what you expect, and therefore what unfolds. If you have failed before, it is because you were assuming from the wrong place. You were assuming lack while trying to create abundance. You were assuming limitation while trying to experience freedom. You were assuming you are the kind of person who has to work hard and wait and prove themselves. And so life reflected that exact identity back to you. The techniques did not fail. You simply used them while holding the wrong assumption. And because assumption is senior to action, because identity is senior to effort, the outer actions could not override the inner state. This is why people can do the same visualization, say the same affirmations, follow the same steps, and get completely different results. The technique itself has no power. The power is in the assumption held by the person using it. One person visualizes from the feeling of already having, from the inner knowing that it is done, and their reality shifts to match. Another person visualizes from desperation, from hope, from the anxious energy of not yet having, and their reality remains unchanged or worsens. Same action, different assumption, different outcome. The action is irrelevant. The state is everything. So when you say you want to manifest something, what you are really saying is that you want to live from the assumption that it is already true. Not that it will be true someday if you do enough or wait long enough, but that it is true now, in the only place that matters, which is within you. Because the world you experience is not happening to you, it is happening from you. You are not a separate being trying to influence an external reality. You are the operant power. You are the one assuming, and reality has no choice but to conform. This is difficult to accept at first because it makes you responsible, not in the sense of being at fault, but responsible in the sense of being the creative force. It means that everything you experience is a reflection of your inner state. If your life is filled with difficulty, it is because you are assuming difficulty. If you feel unseen, it is because you assume you are unseen. If you keep hitting walls, it is because you assume there are walls. And the moment you change the assumption, the reflection changes. Not eventually, not after enough time has passed or enough effort has been made. Immediately, in principle, though the outer adjustment may take a moment to catch up. The shift has already occurred the instant you truly assume differently. People who fail at manifestation are not less capable or less deserving. They simply do not understand that life is not a negotiation. You cannot bargain with reality. You cannot convince it or persuade it or prove to it that you are worthy. Reality does not evaluate you. It does not judge your efforts or your worthiness or your past. It simply mirrors your assumption. If you assume you must prove yourself, you will be given endless opportunities to try to prove yourself, and you will never feel it is enough. If you assume you are already worthy, already chosen, already the person who has what you desire, life will reflect that back without question.
This is why acting as if is the central principle. Not acting as if in a fake or forced way, but truly living from the state of the wish fulfilled. When you act as if, you are not pretending. You are not lying to yourself or playing make-believe. You are shifting your inner assumptions so completely that your natural behavior changes. You think differently. You feel differently. You move through the world differently. Not because you are trying to trick the universe, but because you have become a different person. You have taken on the identity of the one who already has, and from that identity, different thoughts arise, different choices are made, different outcomes appear. If you want wealth but assume you are poor, you will act like someone who is poor. You will think poor thoughts, make poor decisions, see lack everywhere. If you want love but assume you are unwanted, you will act like someone who is unwanted. You will withdraw, doubt yourself, interpret every interaction through the lens of rejection. The outer condition is not causing the inner state. The inner state is causing the outer condition. And so the only work to be done is inner work. The only shift required is a shift in assumption. This does not mean ignoring physical reality. It means understanding that physical reality is the end result, not the cause. You do not change your assumption based on what you see outside. You change your assumption, and then what you see outside changes to match. This is the reversal that most people miss. They wait for the evidence before they believe. But belief, true assumption, does not wait for evidence. It generates evidence. It is the evidence that waits for belief. When you failed before, you were waiting. You were watching the outer world for signs that your manifestation was working. You were checking and testing and doubting, and every time you checked, you reinforced the assumption that it was not yet done. You lived in the future, in the hope, in the maybe. And so the future never came because you were perpetually generating the state of not yet having. The manifestation could not arrive because you were not the person who had it. You were still the person waiting for it. The one who has does not wait. The one who has does not check for signs. The one who has simply lives from the quiet inner knowing that it is already so. They do not need evidence because they are the evidence. Their assumption is so complete that they cannot even conceive of it being otherwise. And because they cannot conceive of it being otherwise, reality cannot present them with anything that contradicts it. This is the law, not a hopeful idea or a spiritual belief, but a law as reliable as gravity. Assumption hardens into fact. You cannot assume and doubt at the same time. You cannot live as though it is done while wondering if it will happen. You cannot be the person who has while feeling like the person who lacks. This is why most attempts fail. People hold two contradictory assumptions simultaneously. They say they believe, but their inner state is one of fear and uncertainty. They visualize having, but they feel the absence. They affirm abundance, but they think lack-based thoughts all day long. And because the deeper assumption is the one that prevails, the surface actions do nothing. The work is to catch yourself in the old assumption and gently return to the new one. Not through force or through repetition of words, but through a quiet inner shift. You notice that you are thinking as the person who does not have, and you simply choose to think as the person who does have. You notice that you are feeling doubt, and you simply choose to rest in certainty. Not fake certainty, not forced positivity, but the calm, steady certainty of someone who knows how things are. The certainty of someone who has already checked the bank account and knows the money is there. The certainty of someone who has already been chosen and does not need to audition. This certainty is not loud. It does not need to announce itself or prove itself. It is quiet and still and unshakable.
It does not argue with circumstances because it knows circumstances are temporary and will shift to match the inner state. The outer world is always catching up to the inner world. There is a delay, not because the law is slow, but because physical reality requires a moment to rearrange itself. But the rearrangement is inevitable once the assumption is firm. People who succeed at manifestation are not doing anything special. They are not more spiritual or more deserving or more skilled. They simply assume correctly. They live from the end. They do not treat their desire as something separate from themselves that they must chase or earn. They treat it as an inner fact, and they let the outer facts adjust accordingly. They do not look for it outside because they have already found it inside, and they know that is the only place it ever needed to be found. If you have been trying and failing, you have been looking in the wrong direction. You have been trying to change the reflection instead of changing what is being reflected. You have been rearranging the furniture in the mirror, and no matter how many times you move the image, the room itself remains the same. The only way to change the reflection is to change yourself, the one standing in front of the mirror. Change your inner assumption, and the reflection has no choice but to change with it. This is where most people lose patience. They change their assumption for a day, maybe a week, and then they look outside and see that nothing has shifted yet. So they conclude it is not working. They return to the old assumption, the old identity, the old way of thinking and feeling. And in doing so, they reset the process entirely. They were building momentum in one direction, and then they turned around and started building momentum in the opposite direction. The outer world never had a chance to catch up, because the inner world kept changing course. Persistence in assumption is not about effort. It is about loyalty. It is about staying true to the new identity even when the old world is still visible. It is about continuing to live from the state of the wish fulfilled even when the mirror has not yet updated. This is the test, and this is where most people fail. Not because they are incapable, but because they do not understand that the outer world is always the past. What you see around you now is the result of what you assumed days or weeks or months ago. It is old news. It is yesterday's assumption made physical. If you judge your current assumption by your current circumstances, you are basing the future on the past, and nothing will ever change. You must be willing to live in the new assumption before the evidence arrives. You must be willing to feel wealthy before the money comes, to feel loved before the person appears, to feel successful before the achievement manifests, not as a technique, but as your natural state. This is not pretending. This is not wishful thinking. This is recognizing that the feeling is the manifestation. The inner state is the substance. The outer form is just the shadow it casts. If you have the feeling, you have the thing. The outer confirmation is inevitable, but it is secondary. It is the proof, not the source. Most people reverse this. They wait for the outer proof before they allow themselves to feel fulfilled. They say they will feel wealthy when the money appears. They will feel loved when the relationship begins. They will feel successful when the goal is reached. But this is backward. The feeling must come first. The assumption must come first. The inner conviction must come first. And then the outer world, being a faithful servant, delivers the matching conditions. It has no choice. It is law. When you understand this, failure becomes impossible. You cannot fail at manifestation because manifestation is not something you are trying to do. It is something you are always doing, whether you know it or not. You are always manifesting your assumptions. You are always creating your reality from your inner state. The question is not whether you can manifest. The question is, what are you manifesting? And if you do not like what you are manifesting, the answer is not to try harder or do more techniques. The answer is to change your assumption, to shift your identity, to become inwardly the person who has what you desire. This shift does not require years of healing or clearing or fixing yourself. It does not require you to be perfect or pure or enlightened. It simply requires you to decide right now that you are the person who has, and then to live from that decision. Not perfectly, not without occasional slipbacks into the old state, but consistently, gently returning to the new assumption every time you notice you have drifted. Not with frustration or self-judgment, but with the calm understanding that you are learning a new way of being, and learning takes practice. The old identity will call to you. It is familiar. It has patterns and grooves worn deep by years of repetition. The mind will try to return to it automatically the way a river returns to its original course. But you are not a victim of your mind. You are the one directing it. Every time you choose the new assumption over the old one, you weaken the old pattern and strengthen the new one. Every time you choose to feel fulfilled instead of lacking, to feel certain instead of doubtful, to think as the person who has instead of the person who wants, you are building the new identity. And eventually, it becomes natural. It becomes who you are. And when it becomes who you are, the outer world has no option but to reflect it. This is why time is not the issue. People say they have been trying for months or years and nothing has changed, but what they really mean is that they have been wanting for months or years. They have been hoping, wishing, working, trying, but they have not been assuming. They have not been living from the end. They have been living from the middle, from the gap, from the space between where they are and where they want to be. And that gap is the problem. That gap is the assumption. As long as you assume there is a gap, there will be a gap. As long as you see yourself separate from your desire, you will remain separate from it. The moment you close the gap inwardly, the moment you assume the desire is already fulfilled, the outer gap begins to close as well. Not because you are doing anything to make it happen, but because there is no longer a gap in your assumption. You are no longer generating the experience of separation. You are generating the experience of having, of being, of completion, and life, being a mirror, must reflect that. This does not mean you stop taking action in the physical world. It means your action comes from a different place. Instead of acting from desperation or effort or the need to make something happen, you act from the inner knowing that it is already done. You act the way someone acts when they already have what they want. Your actions are calm, natural, aligned. You are not forcing or pushing or chasing. You are simply moving through the world as the person who has, and the world responds to that person. People often ask what they should do while waiting for the manifestation, but this question reveals the problem. There is no waiting. Waiting is the assumption of not yet having. Waiting is living in the future instead of living in the now. If you are waiting, you are not assuming. If you are assuming, you are not waiting. The one who has does not wait for what they already have. They simply live. They go about their day, make their choices, take their actions, all from the inner state of fulfillment. They are not watching the clock or checking the mail or looking for signs. They are being the person who has, and that is enough. The sign that your assumption has hardened into fact is that you stop looking for signs. You stop checking. You stop wondering when or how or if. You simply know, the way you know your own name, the way you know the sun will rise. It is not a hope or a belief. It is a quiet inner certainty that does not need validation, and from that certainty, everything flows. If you have failed before, it is because you were living in hope instead of certainty. Hope is future-based. Hope says maybe, someday, if I do enough. Certainty is present-based. Certainty says it is already so. I am already the one who has. There is nothing to wait for because the inner work is done. Hope keeps you in the state of wanting. Certainty moves you into the state of having. And only the state of having can produce the experience of having. This is not about positive thinking. You can think positively all day long and still assume negatively. Positive thinking is surface level. Assumption is deep. It is the foundation. It is the ground of your being. You can say, I am wealthy 1,000 times, but if underneath those words you still feel poor, still think poor thoughts, still see yourself as someone who struggles with money, the words mean nothing. The assumption is what you truly believe, not what you say. And what you truly believe is revealed not by your words, but by your inner state. By the thoughts that arise naturally, makes you
by the way
anxious
you
or
feel
desperate
when you
or
think
sad,
about your desire.
you are not assuming you have it. You are assuming you lack it, and you are feeling that lack. If thinking about your desire makes you feel calm, satisfied, complete, as though it is already a done deal, you are assuming correctly. The feeling is the indicator, not the words, not the visualizations, not the techniques. The feeling, the inner state, the silent assumption that runs underneath everything. So the question is not what technique should I use, or how long will it take, or what am I doing wrong? The question is, who am I being? Am I being the person who has, or the person who wants? Am I living from fulfillment, or from lack? Am I assuming it is done, or assuming I need to make it happen? Every moment you are choosing an identity. Every thought you are reinforcing an assumption. And the sum total of those choices and assumptions is your experienced reality. You cannot experience something you do not assume is true. This is not a limitation. This is the mechanism. If you assume limitation, you experience limitation. If you assume freedom, you experience freedom. If you assume difficulty, you experience difficulty. If you assume ease, you experience ease. The content of your life is the content of your assumptions made visible. Change the assumption and the content changes, not through effort, but through natural law. This is why failure is actually just feedback. It is telling you that your assumption was incorrect. It is showing you that you are still identifying as the person who does not have, still living from lack, still holding the old story. And once you see that, you can choose differently. You can choose the new assumption. You can choose the new identity. You can choose to live from the end. And the moment you do, genuinely and completely, the failure ends. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying and started being. Being is effortless. Trying is exhausting. When you are the person who has, there is nothing to try for. You simply live from that state, and everything unfolds accordingly. The opportunities appear, the ideas come, the doors open, not because you made them happen, but because you assumed them into being. You stood firm in the new identity, and reality had no choice but to conform. This is the shift that changes everything, from doing to being, from trying to assuming, from hoping to knowing, from effort to identity. And it is available to you right now, in this moment, regardless of what has happened before or what is happening now in the outer world.